Good afternoon or good evening to all of you confirmation candidates. My name is Mr. Ray Swider. I've been a teacher here at Nativity, teaching confirmation preparation for about 10 years now. And the sisters were kind enough to invite me to come and share some of the material that I've used in the past with older siblings of yours and some friends of yours in past classes that we think will be of value to you in preparing for the sacrament of confirmation. So I have just a few minutes to share with you tonight. And one of the things that I thought would be a benefit to you would be a brief introduction to the Bible. Now, some of you may be very familiar with the Bible, and if that's the case, that's great. That's wonderful. Some of you a little less familiar with the Bible, but that's okay. So when we start to discuss the Bible, why is it so important? What's so significant about this book that makes it so fundamental? Well, first of all, the title Bible, it's derived from a Greek word biblios, which simply means book. And for many people in the past, this was the book, the only book that they had or were exposed to. In many cases, young children, when they were learning to read at home, this was the only book that they had to use, not only as a religious text, but also just to learn their letters and learn how to read and write. And that's because books were expensive. Books were always hard to come by. So this year, as you do your confirmation classes, so though you may not have this actual textbook, I do know that you have the electronic version of the contents of this. Well, take a look at this book. It's pretty thin. A lot of very important material here, but this is an extract of all of the things that are essential for you to know about your Catholic faith. If you want to find that information, the church has provided the Catechism of the Catholic Church. A little bit thicker book, a little bit more intense. I hope you have a copy of this at home. If you don't, I would strongly recommend that you get one. It's not only useful for you, it will be useful for you throughout your life. It's something that your parents, I think, would find of great use too, because it explains all of the things that are necessary for you to know as a Catholic. But that begs the question, where did the information come from that's contained in the Catechism or contained in the material that you're studying this year? And that takes us back to the Bible. This is the inspired Word of God, passed down as an oral tradition back before people could read and write, before they had the ability to publish books, and then eventually captured in written word. Captured by human beings, yes, but inspired by God to provide His instruction and His teachings to all of us as His creatures and as His sons and daughters in the faith. So let's talk about that Bible a little bit. It's a tough book to read. First of all, it's been translated multiple times from multiple languages, starting in ancient Greek, Aramaic, into Latin, and ultimately into English, French, Spanish, and a variety of modern Western languages. So that translation has made the book a little bit difficult. And in some cases, some of the material and the stories are just not something that resonates with us as 21st century Americans. So you have to look at the Bible in different senses. First of all, there's the literal sense. What you read is actually what happened. I gave you an example here. Jesus was crucified. We know that to be a historical fact. And in fact, you can find evidence of that in places other than in the Bible. Well, then we have an allegorical sense. Maybe you've been studying in your English literature classes in school what allegory means, how we use symbols to express concepts that we have. For example, in the Bible, we talk about the flood and the crossing of the Red Sea, and that's the use of water and the image of water, which is life-giving, also can be life-taking as well. And you'll see the symbolism of water used again and again in the Bible and again as we practice our faith. Third thing is the moral teachings that are in the Bible. I'm sure you're familiar with the Ten Commandments, the law, the way we're supposed to live our lives. So this is instruction. It's very clear that comes out of the Bible about our faith. And then finally, what's called, and this is a tough word, the anagogical. Again, that's symbolic. St. Paul talks about our church, the church being the body of Christ, with Christ as its head, and we're all members of that body of the church, just like you have different members of a human body, fingers, toes, tongue, the mouth, things like that make up your body. So again, those are symbolical senses. But I'd like to give you a brief introduction and a way of looking at the Bible as a historical text, and a very unusual historical text. What do I mean by that? You take history in school. You have world history, you have U.S. history, you can study European history, you can study Roman history, and all of those history books give you facts and figures and dates and people that have been recorded throughout time to tell a given story of what's taken place among human beings. Well, the Bible does that too, but the Bible does one thing that's unique and different from all other historical texts. The Bible tells you how things got started, and the Bible also tells you how things are going to end. And the simple rationale behind that is that everything in human history starts with God. God is the creator. We as his creatures, as part of his creation. So that historical account of us starts with God creating us, and it ends with us going back to God. We come from God, we go back to God. And that's unique in the Bible as an explanation for who we are as human beings and what our purpose is in life. So let's take a look at how we can look at that historical perspective. Basically, the Bible talks about the history of the Jewish people. It starts with the Jewish people as unique among all the people of the earth, as God's chosen people, and it ends with Jesus as a member of the Jewish people, as God and man at the same time, and what he brought to the Jewish people, and then ultimately brought to all the rest of us who weren't Jewish. It starts with creation in the first book in the Bible, the book of Genesis, works its way all the way through all of the things that God created, time, space, the creatures of this earth, all the way through to the Sabbath day, the day when God rested, the day that has been set aside by God for us to rest and reflect on all the wonderful things he's given us. And then this historical account has taken the Jewish people through what amount to 5 different covenants. So what's a covenant? Well, you can look at it like a contract. You probably know what a contract is all about. Your parents signed a contract to buy a car, or they may have signed a contract to buy a house or buy appliances. It's a written agreement between you and someone else for an exchange of goods or for an exchange of services. And if one party or the other doesn't live up to their obligations under the contract, well, there are consequences. A breach of contract means that you can pay a fine, a penalty. If it's bad enough, you can even go to jail. So a covenant is like a contract, only it's a contract between us and between God. And the consequences of breaking that covenant are extreme. For us, the consequences of breaking that covenant are to be separated from God, potentially separated from God forever. He's our creator. That's the last thing that we should ever want, is to be separated from him. So all of these covenants speak about the fact that man separated himself from God, starting with the fall in the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve sinned. And all of these covenants are God's new ways of helping to restore that relationship. God guiding us through the rest of human history to close that breach that we created, that separation that we created, and come back to him. And more or less, this journey of the Jewish people was successful to a point, but never totally and completely successful until Jesus Christ became our risen Lord. That's the last covenant in the Bible, the most significant covenant in the Bible, and the reason why we have our Catholic faith. So let's take a look at these covenants. Here they are. They start out with Adam and Eve, and they basically have some fundamental, very simple and progressive aspects to them. First of all, when Adam and Eve sinned and were separated from God and from God's creation in the Garden of Eden, they had to learn. Adam had to learn how to be a husband and a father and to start a family. He and Eve both learned that together. Their covenant form was the marriage between a man and a woman, something that goes on today and that we consider to be fundamental to our faith. Their covenant sign was that day of rest in the Sabbath. It's in the book of Genesis, where God rested, and we observe the Sabbath today. Well, that worked for a while. Adam and Eve began their family, and human creation grew apart. And there were good people, and there were not so good people. And one of the stories in the Bible, significant story, was how God had to correct fallen humanity. And he did that in the story of Noah and the flood. God destroyed this evil part of his creation and tried to restore the good part of his creation by taking a particular individual, Noah, and beginning all over again. The flood, the use of that symbol of water in this case, was a symbol of death and destruction to eliminate what was evil, and then a symbol of restoration of the goodness that came from Noah. So in Noah's covenant that God established with him, he established Noah as a father to an extended family. His household became that fundamental unit, and the rainbow at the end of the story of the flood was God's symbol of this covenant and how he would help us to reestablish our relationship with him. Eventually, as humanity grew, God decided that he was going to choose certain people to be the elder brothers, the leaders of all mankind. This is the story of why the Jewish people became the chosen people. He chose this gentleman by the name of Abram, whose name later changed to Abraham, to be the founder of the Jewish nation, the Jewish faith. Abraham became a chieftain. He established this Jewish tribe, and the symbol of that covenant was circumcision. It was a physical symbol of Abraham's tribe being different from all the other peoples that inhabited the earth at that time. Eventually, Abraham's people grew into a massive family, a massive tribe, and through a variety of stories that you'll read about in the Bible, they ended up in Egypt. And they ended up there as a captive of the Egyptian people and the Pharaoh. Their younger brothers, who were pagans and who worshipped strange and false gods. And as captives, God had to liberate them, had to take them out of captivity and restore them to their rightful place to be the leaders of all of mankind. The man he chose for that was Moses. And if you read the Bible, there's an extensive story about Moses and his significance to the Jewish people. Moses became the first judge among the Jewish people. He established the nation of Judah and Israel, and his symbol was the Passover feast. That was the last act when Pharaoh released the Jewish people from their captivity. The story continues after that. Moses led the Jewish people to their promised land where God had told them that they would live and that they would live in peace and harmony as long as they obeyed his covenant. They occupied that land. They established a series of cities, a series of kingdoms, and they eliminated those people who had previously been occupying the promised land. And eventually to do that, they determined that they needed to have a king. They needed a leader, someone who could help them prevail in occupying that promised land. King David being the most significant among all of the Jewish kings, one of their greatest and mightiest kings. And his covenant established the kingdom as a national kingdom. The symbol of that was his throne. But it didn't work. For all of those covenants, for all of those new relationships that the Jewish people tried to establish, that God gave them in terms of having a law to live by that was righteous, they failed. And ultimately they were punished for their failure. They went into captivity. They were released from captivity again. This is the Babylonian captivity you'll find in the Bible. They restored their temple, restored their worship in the promised land, but they never achieved the agreement, the relationship, the right relationship with God that he had wanted for them. And that's when God sent his only son, Jesus Christ, to establish the last covenant, the one for all of mankind, for more than just the Jewish people. Jesus is our royal high priest. The Catholic Church is a symbol of that covenant. And the Eucharist that we receive is the way that we restore our relationship with God and the way that we understand the way we are supposed to lead our lives to return to God as our ultimate end. So that's a brief introduction to the Bible. That gives you some construct for it. I talked a little bit about the generals, judges, kings, and prophets to restore rule, and Jesus coming as our God-man. And ultimately, this is what Jesus said about that, why he was here, what his covenant with all of us was meant to be. This is from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus says, "Do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets." That was the basis for the Jewish faith. "I've not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." And Jesus did that not only in the things that he taught us and the things that he told us, but in the way he actually lived his life. If we're followers of Jesus, if we live up to his teachings, if we live up to his example, then we will fulfill the ultimate objective of this historical text called the Bible. We will return to God where we're meant to fulfill our final end. I hope that gives you a little bit of a better sense of a way of looking at the Bible and why it's important and significant. I'm available, and I'm available through the CCD office. If you have any questions at all about any of the material that you're exposed to this year, if you would like to know more about specific pieces of the Bible, if you have questions about it as you go through and read it, I'm more than happy to answer your questions. I will provide the sisters with my email address, and they can make that available to any and all of you. So with that, with my 15 minutes of opportunity to speak with you today, I wish you all the very best. I hope you and your families stay safe during this period of stress from this disease, and that we get past this very soon. And I sincerely wish that God will bless you and will bless your families forever.